want to make a couple comments about leadership, and I hope this is helpful in your jobs and all the stuff that you make and sell to help make the United States and the world a better place. But so, you know, we have a chief scientist. I'm kind of looking at Raul and Yamini, but he's getting pretty famous. His name's Jim Harder, and he's written some bestsellers and stuff. But I said to him, he looked kind of peaceful. He's out in we have a campus out in Omaha. And I said, anything in your labs that you're coming up with that's new? And he's an understated person, he's whatever the opposite of a salesman or rainmaker is or that kind of a thing. That's what Dr. Harder is. He said to me, I think I can prove that the practice of management no longer works. Just work on that for a minute. That's a lot to think about. And I said, how far? And he said, when you go get your MBA at a well-known school and how they teach you to manage, I'm pretty sure it doesn't work anymore. God, that intrigued me. I said, what's your math? What he went on to say is that there's 100 million full-time jobs in America, and if you ask employees, do you know what's expected of your work? Do you think anybody encourages your development? Just some easy questions like that. 30% of Americans say yes to that. So this morning, 30 million Americans got up and came to work coast to coast in the United States of America and are killing it in their job. They feel good. You know what they're doing? They're creating customers. There's nothing more important than creating customers. That's what makes the whole world work, because that's what drives GDP. If there was a new religion started, I'd start it about that. Only 30 million people make the free enterprise system work, I think. 100 million people. Okay, these people are juiced, spirited. They love working on their teams. You've got some of them in your, on your teams now. Always have an idea. It works. I thought maybe we'd have 200 million of them. There's only 30 million of them. Now at the other end, what he told me is, he said, are some really miserable people. They hate their jobs, they hate their boss, and they hate your company. But to be in that, I call them miserable people. You know what he calls them? Only a Gallup analyst would call them this, but he calls them actively disengaged. What the hell is that? Well, he said, I don't put you in that category unless you're actively miserable. So what that means is, so if I'm actively miserable, and Yamini, so Jeff says to me, hey, have you heard about Yamini? She won a project down in Mexico City, and we're all going down, and we're going to start the project. We're going to bill half of it right away, and we're going to help us make our numbers for the quarter, and everybody's so excited. We're going to have a great time, and it's a great project, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's so spirited, and, you know, Yamini, God, you knew she'd pull it out right at the end. I don't want to hear that crap. I'm actively disengaged. I live to squash that stuff out. So do you know what I do because I'm actively disengaged? I go to Yamini's office, sit down, shut the door, and just talk to her until all that inspiration goes away. Then I've had another great day, because I'm actively disengaged. That's 20% of the people that came to work today in America. So while you got 30% crushing it, creating new customers, creating GDP, good jobs and all that, you got another 20 million trying to take it apart. In the middle, you have about 50% that are just there, just kind of showing up. Here's what he showed me. It hasn't changed for 20, we've been tracking it for 20 years. It hasn't changed for 20 years. You see, if we were working on it in the practice of management, as we change and we figure out the future of work and all this stuff we're doing, that should be going up. There's no growth at all. We built consistent sampling frames across 160 countries. We asked the world how they're doing. There's 7 billion people, 5 billion adults, and 3 billion people that say what they want more than anything is to have a good job. So we asked, well, do you have one? That's 30 hours of work with with a paycheck for a real organization. That's just what we call a good job. Not a great job, not necessarily engaged, but just a real job. There's only 1.2 billion of those in the world. That really surprised me. Do you see? So it means that if there's 3 billion, it means that unemployment in the world is actually about 60%. Now, that's not the way ILO, OECD, or people count it, because if you're working part-time, if you're selling gum and flowers in traffic in Indonesia or somewhere, you're employed by that. But if you have a real job, there's only 1.2 billion. The reason I'm telling you that is we also asked them, do you know what's expected of you at work? Do you have a mission and purpose that's important to you? Some kind of easy questions like that. The world, only 15% are engaged at work. 15% times 1.2, I think that's 150 million. Can you imagine that? So the whole world only has 150 million people that go to work and actually feel like they're contributing to a team, to a company, trying to improve something. I just wanted you to know that as leaders, because I think it's really serious. I think we can change it ourselves. I don't think governments can. But it means that human development has stopped. When you stop growing in the job, when companies stop evolving in the workplace, it means that human development has stopped. This is kind of depressing right now. I'll fix it in just 1 minute. But so I went to GDP, because remember, you all know what GDP is. That's just kind of the total sales of all of it. It's everything we make and sell each other. So if the United States was a company, we'd have about $20 trillion of sales. That's all the stuff that you guys make and sell each other, and I make and sell you, and all that kind of stuff. If we were a company, we'd have $20 trillion of sales, and we'd also have $20 trillion of debt, which isn't a good thing. But the question is, are we growing? And GDP in the United States now for 10 years has grown at about 1.7. Depending upon where you start it, let's just call it 2%. Here's the thing. I hope this is interesting. But if you divide it by the number of citizens, the number keeps getting smaller. So although we're growing a little bit, the amount of GDP per capita, that's the one they don't tell you about in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or Financial Times or The Economist. I don't know why they don't tell us that. It's been going down for 20 years. You guys, there it is. We're not buying and selling as much because our workplaces, whatever we're doing in our workplaces, aren't working quite like we think they are. I went to world GDP. So world GDP is about 80 trillion, 80 to 85. So when we're all making and selling, that's how much there is for the whole world. So somehow we all split that up. United States has about 22% of it. At one time, the United States had 40% of it. Can you imagine how dominant that was? But world GDP, remember you got India and China in there. The other BRICS didn't work out as well. But it was supposed to be, the world was supposed to grow at about 5%, then they went, well, maybe 4.5%, well, maybe 4%. Then it went to 3.5%, now down to 2.5%. But so the same thing is happening. While population is growing, we're producing and selling less, but then it comes back to people. It comes back to ideas, and it comes back to entrepreneurship. Those are the two things. When you fuse those together, you get world growth, and you get human development, and you get peace, and you get families, and you get all the good stuff. Somebody's got to fix that. So the guy that, I'm just going to look at my watch here, my clock here. The guy that founded our company was Dr. George Gallup. He's a really famous American. He makes that list of the 100 most influential Americans, not the real good one that has Lincoln on it and Martin and George and all those types. I'm not picking on Time Magazine, if anybody's from Time Magazine, the one with chefs and yo-yo magicians and that kind of thing. So I guess I am picking on him. But he was actually an academic, not really a business person or an entrepreneur. And what Dr. Gallup did is he was a guy that just kind of went around, but he wanted to figure out, first of all, what Americans wanted out of life. He wanted to know what their will was. He wanted to know what made a great life for them. He called it the Great American Dream. Then he wrote it, then he'd write that down. and he interviewed thousands, but that's all he was doing. He didn't even want to do presidential polls and all that. He wanted to figure out what the will was. He had a point that he made that it might seem subtle, but it's brilliant, I think. If you ask him why he was doing it, his answer was, because I love democracy. He said, there's just nothing in the world like this democracy. He says, but I'm afraid leaders, if they have the wrong premises, if they have the wrong foundations or beliefs about what's on the mind of citizens, so they're wrong, they'll create policies and they'll create rules and they'll create regulations, whatever, in a mistaken way, and they'll ruin democracy. So all I want to do is make sure that we keep reporting the will of America. What a great mission and purpose. So he did that 80 years ago. I've been there 30 years. I've been CEO for 30 years. Some people, think that's too long. But so as I look back over the will, it started out with religion. And people wanted to pray to the God they wanted to, and they didn't want to be hassled about that. People wanted peace. So my dad and my uncles all fought in World War II, and they didn't want any more of that. That was pretty ugly. 400,000 dead. My generation was more Vietnam, 50,000. But peace. Another thing was the great American dream was about having a family. Another one was owning a home. So, but somewhere in there, peace, family, and was the great American dream. But there's a lot you can do with that when you know that's what it is. But it's changed. So those are no longer the great American dream. And it's especially, I think, driven by millennials and to a great extent by women in the workplace. So religion, peace, family, own a home. It's changed the primary will of America being to have a good job. But you could argue we're not addressing that. If you look at the subprime meltdown, that was Washington trying to get everybody to a home they could purchase. That's what that whole thing was about. Subprime, we made it real easy to get homes, and $3 trillion got wiped out, shook the whole world. You see how wrong we were about that? This one's pretty interesting, but families are on the decline. In America, we don't really. I'm old. I've been married for 30. When I'm with a group, nobody's been married 30. Nobody's been married 35. He thinks that's. I'm the only guy who's been married 35 years. But we have a different relationship to family. A lot of people my age have been married 4 or 5 times. Some of you have nothing against it, I'm just saying. But see how it's changed the very fabric of our society? Did you know that birth rates in my lifetime is in half? So when I was hanging around my neighborhood, it was nothing to have 5, 6 kids, that kind of thing. Now it's down to less than 2. But you see, the will of the citizens have changed, because now what they've put first is a job. Marriage rates, people get married like 17 years later than my generation did. And of course, fewer kids. And it's not important to them to own a home. I wanted to tell you that as leaders, and I've written about it. Our senior editor, Jeff Brewer's right here. He knows that it drives me crazy, and I roll around on the floor. But we sell a lot of books. Gallup sells millions of books. But I think this is one of our most important subjects, but I'm going to show you a slide. I don't do slide presentations. I don't have anything. This is like my 3rd one ever. And I don't have anything against slides. I just don't really know where you get them. But I got one. I only have one slide, but I still refer to it as my deck. But what's in my deck today is what I'm getting tired of the word millennials, but millennials and women, and now Zers coming in, it's about half the workforce. What they want that's different. And I've been doing this at universities, the best universities and all of that, and saying if we don't make this change, I think it's as big a problem as climate change. That looks pretty ugly to me, if that's really coming. This one comes a lot faster, but it's where economic energy and dynamism just keeps grinding down. And I don't think governments can change it, but I think you and I can. On my deck, my one-slide deck, I have the old style of management that doesn't work and is ruining the world. And on the other side, I have what we got to switch to. Can you please present the slide? Can you see that okay? The first one's almost perfect for me. People don't care as much about their paycheck as they used to. Purpose trumps it. Now, you've got to have fair pay. It's got to be fair, you got to understand it. But you'll never attract real talent until the purpose of the job has something more than pay, is something more than pay. Now, I say this because I went to school at the University of Nebraska in business school. I love the University of excuse me. I love the University of Nebraska. We just gave them a load of money, and I didn't learn anything. Seriously, zero. But you had to go do something. They give you case histories. Can you imagine that, doing a case history on John Deere tractors or something out there, and then going to a job now? I called on Bridgewater yesterday, doesn't matter, but there's nothing from that. How would I draw upon a case history of John Deere for that meeting? And of course, you have a whole university is in your pocket now. But I went to school because I wanted to get a paycheck for $20,000. If I could get a salary of $20,000, that's all I wanted. Well, didn't you want anything else? Yes, I wanted to find a woman. I wanted to have 3 kids and own my home. I'm the perfect, classic old guy. That's exactly what I wanted. And you know what? I got them all. I make $20,000, a little more than $20,000. I have a wife. I have 3 kids, and I own my home, because that was the great American dream, and I nailed it. If I was in college and you came to me and you said to me, what's the mission and purpose that's most important to you in the job that you are going to get? I would say, I honest to God have no idea what you're talking about. I would say, are you a hippie from Berkeley, or what the hell's going on here? There was no, excuse me, there was no such thing as mission and purpose when I first started in the workplace. It was just my paycheck. But now when teams come to work, unless you can think somehow what you're doing is connected to changing the world, you'll never recruit real talent. You'll have Barbie and Kens in suits or T-shirts or whatever they were. I probably shouldn't have said Barbie and Ken. Can you strike Barbie and Ken? I assume nobody's wearing a wire, but you have to figure out what kind of a contribution you're making, because since that's the great American dream, if when I come to work and my job doesn't have meaning, this is the big shift, my life doesn't have meaning. And so if as managers, the teams that we run, or the companies that we run, if we don't put meaning in it, we'll never get that 30% to 60%. If the United States could move that number from 30% to 60% and the actively disengaged from 20 to 10, America would, I don't mean to be talking America here, but America would overwhelm the world. We'd probably have more than a 40%. Another one that our team found, this one was really interesting to me, that we've been really wrong about, is we thought satisfaction was important. I think Google threw us off a little bit. I think Google's one of the greatest companies ever, not because of volleyball courts and ping pong and free food. I think it's because some experts created a real masterpiece where everything that man has ever thought or humankind's ever thought and written down is just, is just right here. That's quite a masterpiece. I don't think it's because a bunch of young people could take scooters out to volleyball courts. That's what our research shows. But imagine, isn't it kind of condescending if I said to Yamini, I said, she's a millennial type, but if I said, we'd love to have you come to work at Gallup. And she said to me, tell me about Gallup, but what could I do that's me? I said, do I have a deal for you? One of the things, Yamini, is I know that you're very athletic, and we have croquet, we have ping pong, and I give you breaks during the day when you can go play ping pong and play foosball and stuff like that. She goes, well, that's just great. I do those at home. I don't really need those. Tell me more about the mission and purpose of Gallup and what I might be doing. Okay, we'll get you free lunch on Fridays. How does that sound? But you see the road I'm going down? I'm going down the road of satisfaction. You got to be very careful because she's not looking for satisfaction. When you really dig down into what she wants to know about her development. What can she become? Do I know that she's got potential? And then what am I going to do to take an interest in that? But if I don't show that interest, this kind of goes back to stars, and none of our organizations grow in the absence of stars. Unless you switch to that kind of a system, you won't attract, or if you do happen to hire one, you won't keep them because you're on the ping pong page rather than on the development. If you look at three societies, I'm going to do China, India, and Japan, because they're the ones that are stuck back the farthest of really important societies. And we were just talking about this for a second, but it's really hierarchical and top down. You got to be real careful about that. But if I tell Jeff to do something, I tell Raul to do something, and you go, well, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't need to you, because I do the thinking, you do the doing, or I get ideas, I don't do work, you do work. You get the point? That's a long way from being a coach. So maybe what I say to Raul, rather than shut up and do it, maybe I say to him, Raul, you got a couple strengths I really need this next month. We need a breakthrough in Berlin. I'm going to put you on a plane to Berlin. You got to go fix this. One of your best themes is restorative. You've been able to fix anything, and here's what I want you to do. And then I really coach you. When you get there, we got a miserable team. We got a client that's mad. Can you do this and that? Then you and I talk. It's not unlike preparing for a big football game, a big soccer game, a cricket game, whatever, in that we watch game film together. And I tell you, don't do this, make sure that you go over here and that kind of a thing. But you see what I am? I'm coaching him. I'm not bossing him. It's tricky, but I think the whole world's got to move to that where you coach. But why am I coaching him? Because he knows Jim's really trying to help him win. And at the very end of the day, that's why you want to develop, because you want to win more. But if you don't have a boss that takes that kind of an interest, then he starts thinking about, I'm going to go somewhere else. I think that's a world we live in. You guys all know this one. But we did what I think is the biggest change management project ever. We did it for Accenture. And they have 400,000 employees and 80,000 managers. One of the things they do is they do an annual review just once. This blows me away. So I actually don't give, let's say you're a report of mine, I actually don't give him any real feedback except once a year. So let's say he goes to do, I said, I love what you did down in Miami, but you know what, could you have done this or this or this or this, but you hear that I'm coaching him. And what I'm telling you about Accenture is not a secret. They've printed this, they've talked about it and everything else. I saved the feedback for his annual review. But maybe I have something real small, like I say, remember, when you go to see Carlyle, Cerberus, and Goldman Sachs, make sure you wear a tie because those guys are still wearing ties, something like that. But see, then I wait a year to tell him, and he says, well, why didn't you just, you know about those places. Why didn't you just tell me then? because the system doesn't allow it. I kind of keep it here. But annual reviews, are being pulled out because you talk about all the stupid things they teach you about managing and developing people, but what you really want is an ongoing conversation. You guys, what about social media? How could I not type him and say, hey, are you coming out of the meeting in Miami? How did it go? What happened? Did you drop that line I told you? You see what I mean? So we could be talking all the time, not just once a year. There are so many ratings at Accenture. They guess that the amount of times, remember, this whole table would rate him, and this whole table would rate him too, and you got to go into a room. The time off the floor to rate, they estimated at $1 billion a year. You see all the low-hanging fruit? I mean, you also can make a lot of money by just doing it right, but by switching, eliminating annual review, are you with me on this stuff? And going to an annual conversation, it not only booms and explodes human development, you also can save $1 billion. You also can save $1 billion. This is this is one of Gallup's big breakthroughs. A guy named Don Clifton. I'm Jim Clifton. That's a different Clifton. But he spent his whole life, he was a professor, and figuring out, he didn't believe that what they were teaching at the business school, he needed more proof, because what they said is that to make Yamini better, what I do is I go and find out what her weaknesses are. So I say, Yamini, here's some things really wrong with you. You're always late, and you got a bad personality. I don't know, whatever it is. I can say that about her. She doesn't have a bad personality. She has a wonderful one, but you get the point. But so I write those down. I'm her boss. And you know what the theory is, you guys? Hell, we still have it. I fix those weaknesses. And then we call them gaps. So I say, Yami, sit down. Here's some gaps you have. Let's really work on them. And then I see her go, hey, Yamini, can you come in here? We just had another one. You got a couple more. I found 2 more gaps. You got like 7 of them. Do you see what's happening? I'm becoming the world's leading living authority on what's wrong with Yamini. I know more of what's wrong with her than her mother does. But that's the relationship we have. But how much fun is that meeting with me? That's our system. If you think that system doesn't need to be upended, I think you're watching I think you're on the wrong channel. Speaking of books, Amazon told us that our Strengths book was the single best-selling book they have ever had. We sold almost 20 million of them, I think. It's incredible. It is working. But what we found is that while her weaknesses, it's really important I know them, but you know what you do? You minimize them. Let's say that she has strengths of it's really easy for her to go see people she doesn't know. As a matter of fact, she can't wait to get there because she wants to find out what they're doing and what they use for this kind of technology and blah, blah, blah. And when she's put on the spot, she also experiences cognitive expansion. Her creativity goes up and all kinds of things. She gets ideas and the prospect or the client goes, holy cow, where's this woman coming up with this kind of stuff? That's her moment. That moment doesn't come to her unless she's in what they call flow. You read that stuff by Csikszentmihalyi? Flow is a fantastic moment. When you have cognitive expansion, you're actually smarter. Your IQ goes up and all that. There's also something called cognitive contraction. That means as your boss, I made you dumber. But when I grind on her weaknesses, let's say that, okay, let's just keep going with that. So she obviously is a great person to go win business, but her follow-through is terrible. She's terrible with e-paperwork and all that kind of stuff. I have a choice. I either sit down and say, you got to get this damn paperwork right, or you're going to drive me crazy. You're not going home until it's right and it's on my desk and blah, 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 blah. But see, I'll just grind the life out of her with those weaknesses. But maybe Jeff comes over and he goes, he says to me, have you ever thought about just getting her a good assistant? Why don't you have the assistant do it? Or Bob's got some extra time, why don't you have him? But see, what you got to do is, she does have those weaknesses, I'm just, as is in this example, so you got to mitigate them, but you better get human development right. The only thing that actually explodes and develops your whole life are your strengths. It almost doesn't matter what they are as long as you know what they are. The guy that invented this, he and I spent his whole life doing it. He died about 15 years ago, but before all of it exploded, so you got kind of a Grandma Moses thing going. But he gave a great example. So Dr. Gallup was basically a teacher. Work on that one. He loved to teach. He loved to teach reporters, or that's how he pulled off management. He'd sit around, he just loved to teach. People all over the world talk about that he was one of their teachers. Became one of the 100 most influential people. You take a guy like Jack Welch. They used to always try to, when I would go to leadership course, they always try to turn me into Jack Welch or Colin Powell. Jack Welch was one of the great acquirers of all time. He could acquire companies and, like you, get the right price. So it's good for everybody. Quite a gift. One of the great CEOs of the last, 50 years. Colin Powell told a Gallup group that he never wanted to be anything but the best soldier in the world. That's just what he worked at. He did. He became maybe the best soldier in the world, one of the most famous leaders ever. What's the point? The point is that Don Clifton said just before he died, he said that leadership scientists are making a mistake because they're trying to find one taxonomy of a leader. You get it? They're trying to find that one, and he said there isn't one. He said these leaders pull it off in their own way because somewhere along the line they learn to leverage their strengths and not let people hold them back by their weaknesses. Those are three really famous Americans. They have more differences than they do things in common. Can you imagine if somebody was trying to make Jack Welch the teacher? What if you're trying to make nice old Dr. Gallup the acquirer? Or Jack Welch, he might have been a pretty good soldier, I don't know. But one of the big solutions, one of the big takeaways when we manage differently is we've got to figure out, and we got to start with a premise that says weaknesses never turn into strengths, but strengths develop infinitely and throughout your whole life. I'm just going to make one more point, then we have 10 or 15 minutes for questions. See if I got, yeah. For me, it was just a job. That's what I was trying to get. What do you have to do as managers? You got to consider that this is my life. And I think that's the biggest change. But you know, if democracy is about the will of the people, and as leaders, all of us, regardless if we run teams or if we run companies, somehow we got to deliver that will a little bit better. Overall, things are pretty good in America. You know, fewer deaths by war, and when you ask people how they're feeling pretty good. There is so much opportunity for us to just blow the workplace through the roof. We're not as good as we think we are, but the fix is pretty easy, and it also can be fixed by us. We don't have to change presidents, we don't have to change governors, we don't have to change mayors. My only concern is that if you and I don't do it, I don't think anybody else is going to. So with that, I'll say thank you, and it's great to see both of you guys again. And now I'll take a few questions.
So when we think about innovation, we think about leadership, and I really have to applaud our keynote this morning. I mean, it was just phenomenal when he talked about focus on the strengths, less on the weaknesses, and to create a culture of partnership. And that's what we have to do with our clients, is to create a culture of partnership. And I'm very pleased and humbled and honored to have a very, very dynamic panel this afternoon for you. Let's have Ms. Melton Denser, the VP of Platform Capabilities at John Wiley & Sons, to please come on up. Let's give her a round of applause, please. Mr. Kanwar Singh, who's the Vice President of Digital Transformation of Operations at Elsevier, my former stopping grounds. Come on up, Kanwar. Now, this is interesting. Our next panelist, I called her the other day just to do a briefing with the panels, as I always do. And I says, you know, Juanita, I think we met at a PSP event. She goes, we met way before then. I said, really? She says, oh, you forgot. Our children went to People in Europe back in 2011. And her son, my daughter and her son. So Juanita Thompson from the McGraw-Hill Education, come on up. She's the Vice President of Digital, she's Director of Digital Publishing Systems. So our format today is going to be very informative, but it's going to be very informal because we do not have any slides. I wish I had one slide to match our keynote. But what we're going to do is that our panelists is going to give you a brief overview, each of their various different background experiences as it relates to this topic. And then we're going to dive into a Q&A. Now, I want you to also participate. So I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask the panel, but please just raise your hand and we'll get your question in and we'll have our panel to address it, because we want you to make a good investment of your time today as well. So why don't we start with Melton? If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what keeps you up at night and what you're working on.
Sure. Is this working? So I've been at Wiley for 4 years as of last month. I'm in charge of platform capabilities. That's all of our content technology, both existing and new. I joined Wiley as the VP of Smart Content as an individual contributor 4 years ago. I didn't exactly know what smart content was. I came from financial industry versus not so smart content. And I was given this gift of 6 months to come with a plan for a plan. So I spent a lot of time with the business folks and the technology folks just to understand what the problem space was and how we would address it. And it actually turned out that the problem we were trying to address was not necessarily smart content. The problem we were trying to address is that how do we create content that is ready for the future? And how do we create content that actually enables Wiley to innovate and serve the purposes of the customers within the dynamically changing environment that we're in? So we embarked on this platform strategy, and that's what we're doing now with about a couple of hundred people. So we are building a web-based platform, putting web as the first thing. Not just building a technology platform, but also contributing into open source communities. We signed up with W3C and actually pushing the W3 standards to help us with the publishing, nature of the publishing. So we have embarked on sort of building the new technology to enable Wiley to innovate and live with the parameters of the changing world. That's what I do.
Beautiful. Kanwar?
Thank you. My name is Kanwar. I'm Vice President of Digital Transformations in Elsevier. My role is primarily focused on 3 key topics. I think they are probably close to most of us sitting in this room. The first area that I focus on is how do we build a digital native supply chain. In the business which we are in content fabrication, the supply chain is a bit fragmented and it goes through a number of steps. It is digital in shape, but it's not digital first. So how do we create a digital first and create an experience for our users, our authors, our readers that's much closer to a digital economy? The second part of the role is to create similar to what Dan mentioned, creating a platform that reduces the life cycle of bringing this content to a much quicker, much complete, and much better quality. So creating a platform which is more service-oriented and working with partners like MPS, where they can plug in their pieces of technology and give us value add, get external core competency, and expand the production network. And third area that we focus primarily is on identifying what are the emerging content standards and content, something like how do we identify more value out of content? How can we make the content more smarter? How we can make a network economy or a networked between the content components that come to us. It's a big organization with huge assets that we have, and trying to leverage them on a real-time basis. So these are the primary three main areas in my role elsewhere.
Juanita.
So I'm currently the Director of Digital Publishing for the professional group of McGraw-Hill. My primary responsibilities, I manage a team of project managers for digital content from various forms of multimedia, and ensuring that our content is viable, that our content is what our users and our customers are interested, and to steal a word, one that our customers are very, very excited about using. Though it is medical content, and though it is science, my team is really engaged in making sure that the content is viable. What keeps me up currently is accessibility. WCAG 2.1, not 2.0, 2.1, because that just happened less than a month ago. So in trying to figure out the best way to integrate our technology that accounts for accessibility into our workflows, and to create that content, not just on new content, but also legacy content within budget, and still ensuring that our content is viable and it's profitable, and that our customers can utilize it. I've spent many years, more than I will share, but this week is actually year 3 of my second stint at McGraw-Hill. I was with McGraw-Hill previously in a different capacity, working on ELL content. I did that for about 6 years, and then I think we all know what happened in 2008. Things just kind of went phew. But I'm back, and I'm excited to be in the digital field, and ensuring that we are ready to be innovative and to ensure that our content meets the needs of our customers.
Excellent. So the topics that we're going to pursue today, this afternoon, we're going to pursue innovation. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about mobile. We're going to talk about roles and some other potential topics that we hopefully will have time to get to. We'll talk about supply chain and talk about who's the maestro of the orchestra in your organization. Talk about the critical path of the article, critical path of your customer. So to kick things off for the panel, let's talk about innovation. And let's start with a very, very simple but challenging question. How does your company define innovation?
So Daryl sent us the anticipated questions last night, and this was a challenging one, so I had to think about it. So we do have a lot, so innovation is an important part of Wiley. So we have all the usual, the innovation challenges, the initiatives, the top 20 selected ideas and all that stuff. But I thought, sort of going back to a few years ago, what excited me about coming to Wiley in the first place was, so I was in a company event, so I heard our CEO back then talk at the stage, and he said, Wiley is a 200-plus-year-old company, which is true. It's very impressive. It started as publishing fiction like Charles Dickens and Melville, and then it moved to publishing scholarly and technical research. during the industrial evolution. So the CEO back then said, Wiley has been around for so many years. We lived through the industrial evolution. We lived through the steam engine. We lived through Great Depression. We lived through 2 world wars. During all of that, the world has changed. Our audience has changed, but we managed to innovate, stay, and actually tell our story in different ways to different customers and fulfilling different needs. I think that is sort of at the core of how Wiley defines innovation.
Okay.
I think innovation in our organization is probably the most frequently used word. And the depth behind this is how do we want to position ourselves in supporting our end customers get the necessary results. So the theme that we call is the organization of the past was read this. This is a good research article, this is a good book, read this. But the theme in which we are working towards is now do this. So from read this to do this is a big jump. And to do this, there needs to be a number of credible sources that how we are able to provide tools, how we provide decision support in creating that easy job. So our innovation is centered around how we make our customers find solutions to their problems. Be it a researcher looking for funding, looking for co-researchers, looking for the right topics to make his research material more palpable, helping pharmaceutical companies in their drug discovery time, providing the necessary decision points. Because we know the solution lies in the content somewhere, but how do we make those connections in making those decision points? So a lot of debate happens there. There's another part of innovation where we focus on can we do a job better? Can we challenge the model in which we are currently doing business? Is this sustainable? Is the model in which, especially the part of the business I represent, which is operations and responsible for production, innovation in our day-to-day language is, why do we do this way? And why not think, another common term is the Silicon Valley way, right? What is a disruption for us in this industry? So it's a quite of a balance, but primarily the focus is around understanding the customer needs and trying to pivot our solutions towards them.
So about 3 years ago, McGraw-Hill decided to change its tagline to being a learning science company. And you say, well, what does that mean exactly? And behind that is the theory that because learning changes everything. And in thinking about that, as a company, we had to dig deep and try to decide, well, how do we implement that and what does that mean? We wanted to be in the business of learning and teaching. And to combine those two things means that we have to then learn as well. Finding ways to directly improve the outcomes and the achievements of our company means that we have not just walk the walk, talk the talk, we also have to be dedicated to how that becomes implemented and what that looks like. So this whole question that you posed brought me back to a post that I remembered reading 2 years ago by someone, I think in our research group, who talked about going into his favorite Mexican restaurant and how he could be served in and out in 35 minutes and not feeling rushed, not feeling that he had been, pushed out in some way. And he thought to himself, well, how does that work? And what's the secret of that? They don't assign waiters to tables. They assign staff to functions. So one person delivers the food, another person refills the water, another one brings the check. And then they have 2 people solely dedicated to seeing a need and fulfilling that need. And so this created an environment where the customer is never waiting, there is never a need, and there is always someone there to fill the gap. So they had actually rethought their whole process without spending any extra time or adding any additional help. So by changing the process, they eliminated customer waiting, they created happy customers, and the turnover of the tables were faster and they made more money. So what's the point? While we work in a different industry than the Mexican food restaurant and service, we can continue to try to develop the most amazing technology products and create greatest innovation that can come from what we already have, our greatest resources, which are people, and then improving the process.
This morning over coffee, Melton and I were having a discussion with one of your colleagues, and to that point, we talk about the whole issue of peer review and why does it take so long? And could you share with our audience that story and also where do you think the fix is?
Sure. So we were talking about this study somebody in my group did a couple of years ago. So when we were building this new platform, we wanted to find out what pain points we wanted to address and how do we get our average time of accepting an article and publishing all the way through in one of our online journals, and how do we get that from, let's say, 140 days to 15. We thought that we had a lot of inefficiencies in the content production cycle because that's what we were building. So we did this whole time and motion analysis, and we found that most of the time spent was actually in the peer review cycle, and most of the time spent within that peer review cycle had nothing to do with technology or whatever. It was just people waiting around and not getting around to coming back with their feedback. So not much you can do with technology to solve it, but we actually did go about looking at how do we design peer review better? How do we maybe, let's say, come up with ways to incentivize the peer reviewers? Do we actually give them badges? Do we rate them? Do we sort of encourage them to come back? Do we send them reminders? So we still haven't 100% solved the problem. We're working on it, but again, I think innovation is not so much as finding the solution to world hunger or anything like that, but understanding what problem you're trying to solve as the problems happen and finding creative ways to address it. So in the peer review space, we are actually looking at many ways to see how to do that better or differently.
So Kanwa, Juanita gave us a very unique example of the Mexican restaurant, where utilizing existing resources but delivering better service. From your vantage point in Elsevier, and I have to say I'm biased because I worked there for 11 years, Elsevier, people will come to work for Elsevier in my group. We said, get ready for change because we change every 3 months, because it's always adopting in a very good way. How do you see applying that philosophy that Juanita talked about into the workflows that you work there at Elsevier? Because Elsevier has acquired, I think, everything on earth. They haven't acquired Amazon yet, but I mean, with all of the different aspects that Elsevier is getting involved with Pure and SciVal, et cetera, how do you rearrange all of these chairs again, and who's the maestro? So I know it's a very difficult question, but
Yeah, I think this question is coming back. Right? This is the tough one. So the way so this is now going into the realms of the culture. I think the organization has always kept a low threshold to bring ideas on the table. And it was actually one of the challenging statements for me when I started about 6 years back, that everybody has a good vote on the table. But then I started seeing the value, because you have a vote on the table, then you can say your mind, say your stuff, that this is a good idea or not a good idea. So from a cultural perspective, it creates an opportunity for someone to say, why are we doing a process like this, and what is the area of optimization? The second is to remain ahead on the space of technology. I think we have continuously pivoting ourselves to become organization which embraces technology. So even operations, it's a technology-driven operation. It's a technology-driven quality. It's a technology-driven XYZ function. And that keeps us, the team, quite on the toes to do this. Not saying that it's not similar for other organizations, but something that differentiates as a cultural that I've seen is that you can bring your ideas on the table, you can leverage the technology factor. And last to add to this is the openness to experiment. I think we know all technology would, there is a promise and there is a delivery component of a technology. Unless until we experiment and we are open to see the failures where it is failing quickly or failing easily or failing, giving us feedback, then creating those into the right tangible data points that can help us in modifying our processes. So that's the dimensions, the facets in which the organization embraces process change.
You know, every organization has its strengths and its weaknesses, right? Its capabilities. But no one organization can have it all. And that's where vendors like MPS can really, really be of a great value to publishers. What is the best practice in working with your vendors to ensure that, you know, the vendor is one with you in your company and your vision? I'm very curious to understand, how do you cultivate that relationship? How do you build it so that it's truly a win-win relationship?
I'll take that. I do feel strongly about this. I think the key is, one of the key things is it's not so much as the vendors, it's the partners. So I'd like to choose partners who actually have the same philosophy and approach to how we do things. I think Rahul and I have known each other now for almost 4 years. He was one of my very first meetings when I joined Wiley, and I did a huge headache because I had no idea what he was talking about at that time. But then his industry was very new to me. But I think we've learned about each other along the way. We've sort of been watching each other, and we kind of have a similar philosophy on how we approach technology solving problems. So I think once we find partners who have the same philosophy and approach, and also complementary things that get put on the table, then that's how we work with the partners. And then my teams are programmed that way, that then they are part of the team. It's not a transaction, it's not an exchange. We have same goals and we work as a team, and that's when we get success from our partners, vendors. When things don't go well, usually when there are barriers and walls between two sides, and then you're expected to sort of throw things over the wall, and when things go wrong, it's somebody's fault, then it doesn't work well.
Juanita?
I would say that it's important to understand that it's a journey that you and your vendor take together. You have to have a goal in mind, and yes, definitely become partners. Partnerships are important so that you understand that it's not steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have to hit those. It's important to understand that sometimes it's step 1A, B, C, D, and then we come back to 2, and then we move forward. Also understanding that being innovative means that sometimes the goal has to change along the way. You may have a big picture goal, but sometimes you need to hit and create smaller goals in between in order to hit the bigger picture. So,
But how do you communicate that internally when 6 months into the project you have to go back to your manager and say, you know that budget I asked you for? Well, we're going to have to modify that a little bit.
Well, it's as was in the one slide deck, ongoing conversations. You have to have ongoing conversations. You create a goal that's larger, that's going to have a larger impact, not just on you, but your group and your division. And through ongoing conversations, are you able to then revise those, hopefully, in a positive manner, or recognizing, what, we said we would get steps 1 through 5 achieved this year, but for various reasons, good reasons, financial reasons or otherwise, we're only going to get through step 1 through 4. But conveying that information from the beginning, and those ongoing conversations will help that. Innovation takes time, and I would say one of the biggest keys is flexibility.
Kanva.
I think quite covered already, but let me add a couple of more points. I think the maturity of a vendor-client relationship in this time frame is to understand there is a transformation, and this is transformation on both sides of this relationship. You know, as we publishers, most of us transform our business models, so goes for our partners. And for partners to, and in this transformation, the solution is somewhere to define what is the next maturity of a business model that makes a win-win combination. If you try to make win one and lose other, or lose one, this is not going to work. And that's where I think communication plays a very critical role. And the openness of both sides, right? It's not just the vendor that has to be open to hear what the client is saying, but for us as well to be open to hear what are the real practical challenges. The value game has to be net positive. And we have to define new business models in this relationship. That helps in the journey.
So when you're talking about defining new business models, now you're talking about a very holistic approach to your management involving your CFO, your financial business controller, whoever, along with the folks in sales and marketing and pulling it all together. What is the process to make sure that everyone is on the same page?
One size doesn't fit all. I think there is a gut to begin with. That what is the model? So I think one of the thumb rules we have been speaking for years is the unit. What is the unit of trade? And we typically in this part of the industry say page is the unit of trade. Let's say how much pages, how much production, and there could be various facets of getting more content out. So how do we challenge, and what's the gut behind that? What is the new unit of trade? The second is what we think is data-driven. So moving from gut to that, how do we experiment this gut into some tangible factors? And third is an open discussion. It will iterate. It will be not hit the bullseye in the first go. But if there's a healthy communication, then we have seen maturity coming in transformation and building new business models. Communicating this up the value stream with CFOs and vice versa, working with partners like MPS, needs a very healthy dialogue. And sometimes these are tough conversations because nobody knows what's the end game. And probably there's no end game. It is an iterative stage through which we keep on innovating.
That I think rollout of any process change is critical. Planning the rollout, how it's rolled out, can be very, very difficult. There's a natural fear of change, and in some cases, fear of a new technology and understanding how it's going to work, how it's going to be accepted. So you have to provide consistent and well thought out and documented guidelines to help those that you need to bring along on that journey. But the most important, in my opinion, is inviting the users to the table. If you don't invite them, or if they don't feel that they've been invited to the table, then there's a natural resistance that occurs that only creates a barrier or a wall to you moving forward and to helping that change to actually occur. Make them feel that they are an integral part of the development of the change. You want the naysayers and the yay-sayers to be involved in the process. I'm currently working on a project with you guys where we are looking to actually change the way that some of our content is published. So rather than going through composition to XML to online, we will actually go from XML to composition. And then that provides us the opportunity to either print if a book is needed or not. But the driving factor is no longer composition cost and all of the facets that are involved with that, whereas they are still an integral part of the project's development. They are not driving the bottom line as much.
You know, we are talking about getting everyone on the same page, getting people aligned. So, Melton, what is without disclosing any proprietary information from Wiley, which is a phenomenal company. Jay Flynn's a good friend of mine. What are some of the best practices as to how you get everyone on the same page? Because you can document it, but folks have to be trained. They have to be brought into the process, as Juanita has said. What are some of the best practices that you find that works at Wiley?
Yeah, so I'd say we're still learning this at Wiley, but Jay Fleur and I have been working very closely for the past 3-4 years. We've sort of been going ups and downs on this journey of completely revamping how we approach publishing research. What I find works is that, especially if you're going after something that is usually complete step change and that has the potential of sort of being an organ rejection in the organization, it is important to have a core group of people to be there to stay together and to, for better or worse, to see things through. We've also experienced, for all the good reasons, we have newcomers coming in, coming out, questioning, so you always have to explain, and no documentation is actually good enough. So I think where it works is that when there is a cross collaboration across multiple disciplines and people actually sort of are on the same page on approximately where we want to go, and they're willing to adjust along the way to do that.
Well, I have dominated the microphone all afternoon. I want to see, is there a question that anyone has in the audience for our esteemed panel? Because I have a lot more questions. Okay. Yes, there is a question there.
For anyone, what do you do when you build it to you want to roll out a test model and show it off the first time and you get a lot of negative comments?
I have a lot of experience in this one. First, you go and have a good drink. Come back and cry a little bit. And then we've actually experienced this because we rolled out something to one of our other partners, and because of some disconnects in messaging and stuff, they said, this is not what we were expecting. This is not going to work out for us at all. So we had to step back and actually try to be as objective as possible and look at it from the other person's perspective. And then we went back in with the newcomers as well. And we said, you know what, we're going to go back and show you what we have. And we're also going to make sure you understand this wasn't the finished product. So one of the things we did was we put the half-finished product in front of everyone. And one thing I know from the publishing industry is people don't like half-finished products because people are very used to beautifully printed books and beautifully printed journals, and they know exactly what the index says before they actually commission writing that book. So people don't like version 1.0 stuff. So now we're actually coming back from it, and then they gave us feedback. We said, you know what, we built great technology, so we can change it. It's flexible, and we're just going to get over our sort of rejection, fear of rejection, and we go right back in. There's nothing else we can do.
Kanvar?
Don't blame the supplier first. So I think the learnings, and it happens more or less every time because the offtake of any new technology rollout in a complex, if you have to reach a 3 Sigma quality level straight away with a new system, it's a very uphill task. But it's also very important for the leadership team to take the feedback on a positive stride and keep the teams protected. That impacts a lot of morale and gives them the energy to, how do we twist it around and say, this is feedback that any product team wants to make their platform, the service, the process, whatever we want to do. So protecting the team and focusing on the key takeaways, eliminating the noise, and there could be personal passion and so on and so forth out of it, and keeping it objective is a really important step. And without this, I think killing a project on a 1.0 is the biggest risk for any organization. It goes really against the vendors as well because they start losing their confidence that whether they can deliver, and from a confidence within the organization, the ability to mature a process to reach a level of output which is acceptable to business.
I would say separating the noise is critical. There is some value in some of the negative feedback that you get. You have to try and harness that information. I too have been knocked down. You pick yourself up, dust yourself off, you make a new plan. Um, but reaching out in communication to the naysayers and find out what's at the heart of their negativity, and then figuring out how you can incorporate that either into the new process or the rollout or wherever the impact points are most positive is the best way to move forward. But you don't give up, you just make a new plan.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about mobile for a second. Now, one of my latest binges I've been on for the last year is accessing content on a mobile device. Let me ask this question. How many in the audience love, I mean really love, to read a PDF on your mobile device? Please raise your hand. Okay. Could you please have the police come escort this woman out? So I believe, this is my belief, when I was talking about semantic technology back in 2007, I left Elsevier to go to this company called Collexis. People thought I had lost my mind. 2009, I'm presenting at the STM conference, semantic technology, and Karen Hunter. How many of you know Karen Hunter? Okay, great, awesome Elsevier executive. She just recently passed away. So, but I learned so much from Karen. But Karen asked me, how come we haven't bought you guys? And I said, well, your guys think that you guys already got this technology. So Karen said, nope, we don't. So Elsevier bought us a year later. Now, I've been on this mobile rant now for the last year. Brian O'Leary is here from BISG. I just did a blog for them. I feel that the mobile device is the first screen. It's not the last screen, but it's the first screen. And how are you going to engage your users with the current mobile technology, and what do you see as the need for change as far as the formats of content on a mobile device?
So this is another area we're working on right now. So I don't think I have the exact right answer, but so I think the mobile is not for reading a 150-page book or a material. I think the purpose of mobile is to convey the gist of what you're going to about to read, or actually pick the important pieces that can come alive on the device that actually keeps you interested and also gives you relevant information in whatever format it is. So we are experimenting with one of our German books right now to see what we can do with it, but it's definitely not putting the entire content into the mobile device, I think.
Kanva?
I think it's not a technology question, as per me. There are a lot of pieces of technology. Most of the industries are adopting this. You've seen how magazine and newspapers have adopted and changed. And most of the publishing organizations have also experimented in, say, HTML5 or liquid flows or whatever it is. I think it's the position in which the user engagement happens. And for a professional publisher, for a professional reader, what part of where does this fit into the engagement model? And if the PDF fits into an engagement model as an offline reading experience, then it will be a very difficult proposition to replace by technology itself. And the intent would be how you can create an online reading experience which is more richer than a PDF offline reading experience. And to create an online reading experience, you have to create more and make it easy. So the behavioral aspects can be addressed with that pieces of technology. A lot of experimentation is happening in this space, and I'm sure my colleagues would also be doing something similar. I think we are also, STM is also sitting in that part of the post-research distribution mechanism where this is an acceptable norm, and it's not taken as, if you speak to our colleagues who are researchers, it's not a burning, I believe it's not a burning question for them, because it is a consumption of information. If you are adding more value in that information at the point of distribution, then we will be able to switch that behavior. And you can start seeing trends happening from what Jim was highlighting, the newer set of researchers to a traditional who are an experienced set of people working in academia.
Um, for us, primarily our content is directed at students. And the students need to have the content available in as many forms and formats as possible. So currently, a student can sign into our content and it will work the same on their mobile devices as on a tablet, as on a laptop. That's something that we recognized early on as a need, and knowing that because of our users in the market, that if that was not something that we took care of early on, and it's constantly being developed and improved because browsers change and formats change and products change, but it is something that we recognized early on as something that we had to make sure was taken care of from the beginning.
Okay. It's time for the magic wand question. If you could wave your magic wand, what is the one innovative thing that you would want your company to do today?
This was not in the list.
It's the magic wand question. It's the Joker question.
I always say this to my team: the magic wand doesn't exist. We need to keep saying that over and over again to, to our editorial teams and to other stakeholders that we work with. We can do a lot of things, but as much as we want, magic does not exist. So if I took this leave of my faculties and said, okay, there's a magic wand, I think it would be to get folks more accepting of change. Change is inevitable. Change usually happens for a reason. And if they could just be a bit more accepting and open to a process as it's rolled out. That's not to say you don't need the naysayers, because they only make you better, but just to be open and accepting.
Yes, a good way to answer a magic wand is to ask another question to you then. Yeah. So the way I will describe is if we do a fast forward and see 2023 or 25 and say, where do we sit? Are we in a panel at that point of time? And if I had a magic wand that time, how would I solve this thing? And that's a tough one. And I think closer to what Mike mentioned, it's the people's ability to there is no shortage of ideas, but there is a big challenge to voice the ideas, and there is a big resistance many times in the organization to experiment with these ideas. So how do we create a culture where more ideas and experimentation happens to define the future state where we are able to say 5 years, 7 years from now, because there is a lot of disruption in this space. I think that's a more open thought process, people behind it.
I think along similar lines, it would be great if sort of technology was considered as a sort of a first-class citizen partnership in the organization. And it doesn't magically solve every problem, and it learns by working with it. So if we actually had a really collaborative environment where technology is at the heart of the things, but not treated as if it doesn't solve one problem, it's not going to solve any problem, just this iterative approach to it. I think then if you could do that, then you could drive change, you could innovate, you can fail fast, you can run long projects, anything can come out of that. I think that's at the core of what I would do.
And when you think about culture, this morning the talk by our keynote was phenomenal when he gave us the statistics in regards to what is the productivity level within the United States. So the question is, what can we do as leaders in the culture that we all reside in to try to get that majority that is not productive to be more productive, because they're stuck into, well, this is my job description from 5 years ago. I'm still doing my job description from 5 years ago. But now the environment has changed, and I need to learn new skills. I need to learn new things, and I need to bring a different mindset. How do we as leaders communicate that and get that through our organization?
I would say coaching, which was one of the items listed, but coaching is very, very important, and not, once a year, but on a much more consistent basis. I know one of the things I even learned this year is that it's important to, establish those one-to-one conversations. And coaching doesn't only occur, in a scheduled time, we're going to meet at 3. Coaching can occur in a hallway conversation. And likewise, you have to seek to be coached as well. So I would say coaching is one of the biggest keys.
Kamran?
I think as leaders, our largest responsibility should be to create the right vision for the organization and pass that vision in as clear terms to the larger workforce, so they can correlate with this. If they know what is the driving force, then the workforce starts adapting themselves, identifying gaps where there are gaps to fix and align themselves. So if we are able to create a vision and clarity of goals, that this is how we see. It is a changing world. Annual PDP processes or objectives are no longer valid. My business goals can change in 3 months, 6 months. And these practices have been existing for many years, and especially in an organization which is almost 200 years old, they are more difficult to change. So the agility through which the vision is communicated, as well as the goals are set and communicated, not making a more theoretical, procedural ritual rather than collaborative dialogue. Why are we doing this, and how quickly we can disseminate information.
Excellent. Yeah. Melton, bring us home.
So I agree with everyone here. The other thing I do usually is just go and talk to people in the organization, not our people, but anybody in the organization. So we went from I think from just by myself to a I think 150, 200 people organization by picking a lot of the people from somewhere else in the company. Most of the time, I think about half those people who don't think that they have skills to apply are actually brilliant people and who know their spaces and they have potential to learn more. So the more you talk to them, the more you can point to and identify certain individuals you can bring. And when they come in, their friends know and they come in. So that's how I approach it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are done with our session today, but let's give them a big round of applause.